guys, welcome to today's video and thank you so much for watching. So in this video we're going to be talking about how much you actually need to be able to buy your first house in the UK. And I'm not just talking about the deposit, I'm talking about all the other hidden costs as well involved in buying your first house, so that hopefully this video helps you stay more prepared and you know what to expect in the home buying process. I'm going to be telling you how much we actually spent on all these hidden costs when we bought our first property, because although saving up the house deposit is usually the hardest part, there's a lot of other hidden costs that can quickly start to add up. However, the good thing is that once you saved up that initial house deposit, basically you've already saved up the chunk part of the money you need to be able to buy your first house. If you're just seeing me for the first time, my name is Linda, and on this channel I talk a lot about personal finance, investing, and how to level up in your career in the UK. Right, so without wasting much time, let's quickly talk about how much you actually need to buy your first house in the UK. The first cost, which is the most obvious one that everyone talks about, is your house deposit. So as a first time buyer, ideally you should put down at least 10% of the house value as the house deposit. You can still get a mortgage with just a 5% house deposit, but the interest rate will usually be higher, which is why ideally you need to have at least 10% of the property value as your house deposit. You can still buy a house with just a 5% house deposit, but the interest rate will be higher, which is why a lot of times it's always better to put down at least 10% house deposit, and then the bank can give you the remaining 90% of the purchase price as a mortgage. If you're able to save more than 10% as your house deposit, that's even better, right? Because it means that you're able to access better interest rates, and also your monthly repayment will be lower. But I know that with the cost of living these days, it's quite difficult for a lot of first-time buyers to save up more than 10% as the house deposit. So let's quickly look at the numbers. If you want to buy a house of £250,000, your 10% house deposit will be £25,000, and then the bank can give you a mortgage to cover the remaining 90% of the purchase price. But if you prefer to buy with just a 5% house deposit, for the same house worth £250,000, you will only need a deposit of £12,500. But then that means you'll be taking out a mortgage to cover 95% of the purchase price for that house, which, as we said earlier, would mean higher interest rate and higher monthly mortgage payments. So ideally aim for at least 10% house deposit or higher if possible. The next cost that we need to think about, of course, is stamp duty. So currently for first-time buyers in England and Northern Ireland, you don't pay stamp duty on houses worth £300,000 or less. For the portion over £300,000 to £500,000, you pay 5% stamp duty. So let's imagine you're trying to buy a property worth £350,000. So you don't pay stamp duty for the first £300,000, but that extra £50,000 you'll have to pay 5% stamp duty. So if you're trying to buy a house of £350,000, you won't pay stamp duty for the first £300,000. The remaining £50,000 you will have to pay 5% stamp duty, which will be £2,500. The next cost we need to think about, of course, is solicitor and conveyancing fee. So as part of the house buying process, there's a lot of legal paperwork involved, from anti-laundry checks to personal ID checks to environmental checks to local council checks. There's a lot of legal paperwork and checks involved that the solicitors and the conveyancing team have to do, and that also incurs a cost. Usually for your solicitor and conveyancing fee, you will expect to pay anywhere from £1,000 to £2,500. But always double check at the start of the legal process. Your solicitors will usually give you a quote at the start of the legal process. For us, we paid about £1,500 for all the legal costs when we were buying our first property. The next cost that we need to think about is the mortgage broker's fee. So some of the mortgage brokers get paid by the bank for finding them customers, but a lot of independent mortgage brokers will actually charge you a fee for finding you the best mortgage products. And I highly recommend using an independent mortgage broker because they basically go shopping for you, right? They have access to so many different lenders and they can compare different mortgage products to be able to find you the best mortgage deal that suits you and your personal circumstances. So although you have to pay an extra fee for using a mortgage broker, I will highly recommend that you don't skip this process. Mortgage broker fees is basically the fee that the mortgage broker will charge you for finding you the best mortgage products, and this can cost between £450 to £1,000. When we're buying our first property, our mortgage broker fee was £650. The next cost that we need to think about, and this is one that actually caught me by surprise when we were buying our first property, and that is your mortgage product fee or your mortgage arrangement fee. Essentially, the mortgage product fee is the fee that the lenders charge you for taking out a mortgage with them. For your mortgage product fee, you can typically expect to pay anywhere from £500 to £1,500. When we were buying our first property, our mortgage product fee was £999. Now, when you're taking out a mortgage, you have two options. You can either decide to pay this mortgage product fee upfront, which means you pay this fee as part of the application, or you will be given the option to add it onto your mortgage. Now, strongly advise that you don't add this mortgage product onto your mortgage. So instead of adding this fee to your mortgage, it's a lot better to pay it upfront so that you don't have to pay any interest on it. As I said earlier, we paid £999 as our mortgage product fee. The next cost that I need to think about is survey and valuation costs. So before the mortgage is actually approved, the lenders will send surveyors to go and value the property. As part of that process, they will have to do a home buyer survey and valuation report to be able to assess how much that property is actually worth. Now, one of the key reasons why the lenders do this is that if in the eventuality that you're unable to keep up with the mortgage payment and they have to sell that property to recover the money, they want to make sure that the property you are buying is worth the money they're actually lending to you. Which means that if they have to sell that property in future, they can actually recover the money that they gave you to buy that property. So they send the surveyors to go and value the property and give an estimate of how much that property is actually worth before the mortgage is approved. Now, this ended up working in our favor when we were buying our first property. Our home buyer survey actually saved us thousands of pounds. So when we were buying our first property, the lenders actually did a valuation report before our mortgage was approved. However, when this valuation report came back, it basically said that the property was worth £10,000 less than what we had offered to pay for the property. So basically, imagine a property was worth £120,000 and we had offered to pay the seller £30,000 because we really wanted that property. Obviously, as first-time buyers, we didn't know any better. So when we realized that the valuation report clearly stated that the property was worth £10,000 less than what we offered to pay the seller, we had to go back to the seller and renegotiate the purchase price. And this time, we reduced our offer by £10,000 and the offer was still accepted by the seller. So basically, we used the valuation report as a bargaining chip in this case to be able to reduce our purchase price by £10,000, and that saved us a lot of money. Typically, for your home buyer survey and valuation fee, you would expect to pay between £450 to about £750. However, if you're buying older properties, some lenders will actually include a free home buyer survey and valuation report as an incentive for taking out a mortgage with them, but it's always worth checking when you're putting in your mortgage application. Also, it's worth mentioning that for older properties, if you're buying older properties, the lender might actually want more surveys, like a full structural survey, before the mortgage is approved, and this can potentially cost more. When we're buying our first property, the home buyer survey and valuation reports were all included for free as part of the mortgage process. We're all included for free by the lender, so we didn't have to pay for this. The next cost that we need to think about is the cost of moving house, right? Because unless you're planning to pack everything yourself, you're going to need movers to help you move to your new home. But to be honest, this is a very straightforward process. Essentially, you just need to pay for your man and van service or your moving company that can charge you an hourly rate, and then they can help you move everything from where you currently live to your new home. Now, a lot of factors will affect how much you actually pay as your moving cost. Things like the distance to your new home, how many trips you're planning to take, how long it will take you to pack all your belongings. All these things will affect how much you actually pay as your moving cost. And of course, if you're moving to a new city, that will also impact how much you pay as a moving cost. For us personally, we paid about £250 as our moving cost. Next, we have to think about the cost of decorating and furnishing our new place, right? But that's usually the exciting part, because it means that you finally completed on your new property. And let's be honest, anyone that's bought a property will tell you that you're never done decorating, because there's always something new you want to change in the house. There's always something new you want to add to make your space feel more homely and, you know, more cozy for you and your family. So I'm not really going to put a price on this. The most important thing is that you get the essentials sorted out first, which will be things like flooring, your kitchen cabinets, your countertops. As soon as these things are sorted, you can move into your new property and then take your time to start decorating the space how you want it to be. The honest truth is that it will cost you thousands to actually furnish and decorate your space. At that point, you know that there's no rush, because you can take your time to settle into your new space and then slowly start buying things while you're living in the space. Usually, when it comes to furnishing your house, the most expensive things will be furnitures like your bed, your sofa, your dining table sets, and then obviously kitchen appliances like your fridge, freezer, your dishwasher. But as I said earlier on, you can take your time to get all these things sorted. The next cost that we need to think about is your home insurance and life insurance. So one of the conditions for taking out a mortgage is that you need to have a valid home insurance in place. Depending on the size of your home and the kind of property you have, home insurance can usually range from about £25 a month up to £75 per month. Now, you can decide to pay this either once a year or have it as a monthly direct debit. We currently pay about £27 per month for home insurance. The next cost, on top of that, your lenders and your mortgage broker will also advise you to get a life insurance. Now this is optional, but it's a very good idea to have your life insurance if you have a mortgage. That means you'll have to think about your life insurance, critical illness cover, and income protection as well. Now these are all extra protection that you have to think about. Having adequate life insurance means that God forbid you were to pass away tomorrow, the life insurance will basically pay off your mortgage in full. I personally pay about £35 per month for my life insurance. Your income protection policy will be able to cover the cost of your mortgage and your essential bills. So that acts as an extra protection so that you know that your mortgage will be covered if you were unable to work or something was to happen to your income. So hopefully this video gives you a breakdown of how much you actually need to buy your first property, from the deposit to all the other hidden costs in buying a house. I hope that this video helps you stay more prepared in the home buying process. If you've enjoyed this video, you might also want to check out my other video on how I saved up for a house on a very low salary. Thank you so much for watching, and please don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care. Bye bye.